Welcome. The sequence in this yin practice will include the first yin posture of caterpillar pose, and then one side of dragon pose, frog pose, and then the other side of dragon pose, Sphinx pose, and then both sides of cattail or cat pulling its tail pose. So useful props during this practice might be one or two yoga blocks if you have them. You can substitute books or bolsters, even blankets and pillows. Blankets and pillows, extra ones, are also useful as well for extra padding if you need it. The story that I'll tell during practice comes from Native American star lore. It's a Navajo creation tale that involves the Black Spirit and the trickster, Coyote. This practice begins with a standing warm-up. So make your way into standing. Come into what's known as mountain poses. Mountain pose is standing with a little bit of integrity and awareness. So I always like to say, have the same attitude when you're finding a stable, comfortable seat. So come to standing, bring your spine, your body into its neutral position, and then notice if there's anything that feels unstable. Start with your legs and your feet and rearrange them. So maybe your feet need to be a little bit wider apart. Maybe the toes need to be turned in or out a little bit. So find that stance where you can feel the entire floor underneath the bottom of both feet and feel that rooted connection that your feet have with the floor. And then there's very light toning in the legs and in the hips, and this creates a very stable base. So you know you've taken a stance where you know you're not going to fall over here. Spine is neutral, shoulders are soft, maybe rolled back just to open up the front of the torso slightly. Chin is slightly tucked and head is moved back. This is all just to create a very, very neutral position, and then arms are extended down at your sides. I like to extend my hands forward, and this is sort of a trick to roll the shoulders back. But if your shoulders are already rolled back here, then your hands can be kind of in whatever position you want them in. Now take some time to soften your face, release your jaw, relax your tongue, soften your eyes, gaze off into the distance, maybe allow your focus to be a little bit fuzzy for the moment. Focus on maintaining that sense of stability. So you're not in a position where you're starting to fall over. Mountain pose is a young pose. There is some very light toning going on to maintain the stability of the posture here. This is considered a very fundamental and important posture in yoga, is learning to just stand with stability and integrity. Once you've brought that awareness into play, then just notice your breath. Notice how the cycling of your inhales and exhales is part of this entire experience of just standing. And you might notice that if you stand here long enough, maybe you get too relaxed and you start to kind of drift to one side or another, and then your muscles take care of it. So your muscles fire when they realize you're drifting over one way or the other too much. And then that maybe tells you that you need to bring more tone into the legs, the hips, the torso to maintain a nice steady state. So this is getting a sense of mountain pose. So a psychological visualization that you can include with mountain pose is visualize yourself as a mountain, as a vast mountain, huge mountain, just vast in size and scope. And visualize the sky above you as this vast sky. Above and around you, the space around you is the vast sky, and you are this vast mountain. And use that visualization to help you create this sense of vastness of your being, your complete, unique, total being, all components of it. So just one more breath here. Then we'll try a standing lateral bend. So maybe you have to adjust your feet for this. Maybe you like them closer together. Maybe they stay right where they're at. But go ahead and place your left hand on your left hip and then raise your right arm up overhead. And then grow it long. So you're growing long through your entire body, from your right ankle all the way up through your side body, through your fingers. And then start to bend and round over to the left side. Maybe shift your hips slightly over to the right to compensate for the shift in center of gravity here. And you're just feeling, stable. You're also feeling this lengthening, this stretching in the right side here. And then just maybe hold that for a breath here. So lateral bends are considered balancing. So the Native American story I'm going to tell is actually a story about balance. Go ahead and bring yourself back up on the other side here. So bring the right arm down, place it on your right hip, and raise your left arm up. And the same thing here, extend through the whole left side. So not just left arm, but left torso, left hip, left leg, left foot here. And then you might have to shift your hips slightly over to the left to counteract, this is simple physics here, counteract the shift of body weight here. And then reach up and over. And then just find an easy edge. Find a place where you're feeling something. And then stay here for a couple of breaths or so. The story, the Native American story, is actually one about yin and yang, even though it comes from the Native American Southwest of the US rather than from Asia or from China here. And it's their own words, their own description. So if you contemplate carefully the story, go ahead and bring yourself back up. You might notice this yin-yang connection here. We'll get down to the floor through a little bit of a half sun salutation here. So go ahead and stand in mountain pose here. And then lift your arms up overhead. Make a big sweeping circle. And then grow long here. Everything nice and neutral and feeling long. This is called upward salute. And then arms come wide and down. Hinge forward. Try to keep your spine neutral. And if that means you need to bend your knees a lot, go ahead and do so. And then at some point, allow your spine to round. Come into a forward fold here. You almost come into ragdoll. And then bring your torso up halfway again, lengthen and extend your spine back towards neutral again. And then go ahead and round your spine back down. Bend your knees a lot so you can put your hands on the ground. And then step one foot back, step the other foot back. Come into table pose. And then slowly make your way back into a child's pose. Knees can be together or knees can be wide. You're trying to find a child's pose that kind of fits you here for a moment here. And then go ahead and bring yourself back up to table, and we'll get started with our first long-held yin posture, which is caterpillar pose. So caterpillar pose is an extended leg seated forward fold. I'm going to sit up on a block, so you start seated, legs out in front. If you have a lot of stiffness in your back body, particularly the backs of your legs, maybe some height. Maybe you don't need a block, but maybe you need a blanket or two to sit up on. I'll sit up on a block here. Legs are extended. They might be straight or they might need to be bent here. And then this is the beginning of caterpillar. So this is where we'll stay. You can stay with an upright spine, or if you wish, include a forward fold by hinging forward, rounding and relaxing your spine here until it stops. And if you don't like it hanging in midair, then you can find props that you can use to kind of put under your torso or maybe your head and your neck here. So this is caterpillar. You allow everything to relax. My legs are externally rotated. So when I relax the muscles in my legs, they want to externally rotate out like this. Your legs might do something different. Maybe they roll in, or maybe they stay just kind of facing up. Doesn't matter. Let them do what they want to do when you relax the muscles here. I like to bring my arms in close here. And then we'll stay here. Find your edge. So Right? This is a reminder of how to, the principles of yin. The first one is finding your edge. So the idea is don't worry about what it looks like. Worry about finding accessible stopping points, those places of feelings of resistance and traction and pressure here. And using any kind of prop that you need to feel stable here. For some of us, this is having these legs extended, too much sensation, too much desperation, too much pain. If that's your experience, come out of caterpillar and come into butterfly. So for butterfly, bring the bottoms of your feet together, bring them in a little bit, bend your knees, bring your knees out to either side, maybe prop a knee if you need to, and then fold forward into butterfly. I often call this metamorphing into butterfly. If caterpillar doesn't work, then transform yourself into a butterfly. But if caterpillar is not desperate or painful, maybe just stay here for caterpillar. We'll stay here for a couple more minutes. So once you've found this edge, once you've relaxed the muscle, now you're just letting gravity and time. Then the second step is to set the intention of staying in the posture for a while. This is called stillness. Staying doesn't mean you're frozen or rigid in place. You can move around to adjust or experiment with your edge. You can go deeper into the pose. You can come out of the pose to find what the best edge is. I realize I do that all the time when I'm practicing. The idea is to not jump completely out of the posture because one is bored here, right? So if you're finding yourself bored, it probably means you're not deep enough at an edge. If you come completely out of a posture because you're in deep pain, it means you were too deep, and you need to experiment more with modifications to find the edge here. The third principle is time. So we spend a lot longer in these yin postures than in normal yoga postures. We stay for a few breaths, but here in yin we're staying for several minutes with the muscles relaxed, trying to maintain some healthy stress or traction in the connective tissue system. Getting to know these sensations we're feeling, getting to know what our breath is up to. Our breath often tells us what our mood is here. Since time is part of the practice and part of the posture, you can stay for less or longer periods of time. In these videos, I'm usually staying for around 3 to 4 minutes per posture. You don't have to stay as long. You can stay longer. You're trying to customize this practice for your own being. And time is one of the customizations. Maybe you want to stay longer. So go ahead and stay longer. But we've been here for a little over 3 minutes, so I'm going to start to come out. So maybe plant your hands on the floor. Use your arms to push your torso back up to a nice neutral position. You get there, maybe you want to lean back or make gentle twists here from side to side. I'm going to suggest a little bit of a gentle core yang counter pose for caterpillar. And this is both sides of sunbird. So make your way gently to hands and knees. Find a stable table pose here. And then root through your hands and then extend your right arm forward and extend your left leg back. And then really go long between the two. Notice maybe the balance here in this posture. Maybe one more breath here. And then go ahead and release, come back to center. We'll do the other side here. So extend the other leg out. Extend the right leg out. Extend the left arm forward. And then really reach and stretch through the back of the heel. I got the foot flexed, but you can point the foot if you want to, or you can maybe point and flex the foot, or even make circles here if you want to. One more breath here, and then come back to center, come back to table pose. The next yin posture is dragon pose. So from table, bring the right foot up in between your hands, inch the left knee back. And then find your dragon. So this is dragon pose. So hands are rooted on the ground, and if they don't reach the ground, this is where the blocks can come in handy. You can place blocks underneath your hands, or if your hands reach the ground, maybe you don't need the blocks here. Place any kind of extra padding underneath that back shin, just in case you need some relief for that back knee or that back ankle here. You can move this front leg around and front foot, so maybe the front foot needs to go out, maybe it needs to turn to the side. The knee, again, you're supporting your weight kind of a little bit on your hands here. And so the knee can kind of be wherever you want to. You can stretch forward and get some stretch in the back side of this front leg, if you will. And then we'll stay here for about another 3 minutes or so. Maybe you're in dragon and you're deciding this is too crazy, too painful, too desperate here. So an alternative for this is to slowly come out of dragon. Make your way onto your back. I'm going to suggest half knee into chest pose. So the left leg is straight, lying on your back, and then you just bring your right knee into your torso, maybe over out to your right armpit, and squeeze it down to your armpit. Hands can be behind the thigh here, or they can be on the shin, whatever feels better. This is a nice hip opener, just in case dragging is just a little bit too much. So this is the version of inverted dragon here. Otherwise, notice how you're feeling in normal dragon here. Notice we've been here a little over a minute, so notice if you need to readjust your edge. Notice what your breath is doing. Notice your sensations. These are the kind of the basic tenets of practice. And if everything is going well, then you allow yourself to maybe listen to the story. So a little bit of a preface for this story. So a lot of Native American tribes, well, probably all tribes in the world, they have their own stories and tales of creation. And one of the bigger Native American groups in the United States is the Navajo Nation. They have their own set of tales of how the world was created. This particular story is how the stars ended up in the sky. And like I was alluding to earlier, I realized that this story also is another meaning to this story is also the Navajo's sense or version of this balance of yin and yang. This balancing of not necessarily opposite, but contrasting polarities that are dynamic and both have to exist at the same time. You really have to maybe think about the story to understand where that comes from. And I'll go ahead and get started here. So maybe four more breaths on this side of dragon, or maybe you're done with it. So the star tail. The star tail starts out like this. In the beginning, before there were stars in the sky, the great creator spirits met in a hogan to decide how to make the world and what to put in it. When all of the great spirits have met, the last one arrived, and that great spirit was known as Black Spirit. And as Black Spirit entered, the other great spirits kind of were curious about him. So one more breath here, and then we're done being curious about this side of dragon. And then slowly bring yourself out. I'm going to suggest the posture known as downward facing coyote pose, which we all know as downward facing dog pose, but coyote is going to come into play in the story later. So root through your hands, tuck the back toes, see if you can lift the back knee up, and then press yourself up into downward facing dog here. This yang posture. Don't worry if that didn't happen. Just take your time and be gentle with yourself coming out of 3 minutes of dragon pose. You can take your coyote for a walk. You can just stay here for a moment. Or do something out, maybe cat and cow is here. At some point, bring your knees back down to the ground. Doing a little bit of a mini flower sequence. So instead of doing immediately the other side of a dragon, I'm going to sandwich a symmetric posture in between the two. And that symmetric posture will be frog pose. So maybe a little bit of padding under the knees will be necessary. It's very useful for me to do, so I'll unfold my blanket here. So for frog, you'll come to hands and knees, and then you'll move your knees out wide and sort of keeping your shins parallel to each other. So shins and ankles go out wide too, as knees go out wide, and they just go out as wide as they go. This is why usually there's a lot of pressure underneath your knees and your ankles here. This is why the extra padding here. And then you can stay up on straight arms, you can come down onto forearms, or you can, maybe some of you might be able to rest your chest on the floor. But this is frog pose. And then we'll stay here for a few minutes here. Now for some of us, frog pose is not going to happen. It's a little bit too much of a direct hip opener. So a good alternative is baby frog, or sometimes I call this warrior four pose. So if this is not working for you, stay here if it is. Come to hands and knees, bring your knees wide, maybe feet closer together, hips back towards your heels, and then lower your torso. And you can put things underneath your torso for maybe a block on the medium setting underneath your rib cage, just to create a little bit of support, or maybe you have a bolster here. So this is a good alternative if frog is a little bit too desperate here. Otherwise, find your version of frog, and then we'll stay here. I'll stay here for another couple of minutes or so. So Black Spirit, as you can imagine, is this being that is really black. It mimics the darkness of the night sky. But on his ankle is this small group of stars. And the other creator spirits noticed this, and they asked him what that was on, what those stars were that were on, those group of stars that were on his ankle. And without a word, he just decided to, instead of telling them, he'd show them his power. So what he did is he stomped 4 times. Each time for each of the cardinal directions. He stomped once for the east, the south, the west, and the north. So the first time he stomped, the small group of stars on his ankle jumped up to his knee. The second time he stomped, the group of stars jumped up to his hip. At this point, the other gods were impressed. The other spirits were impressed with his power, and they all understood and nodded with great approval as what he was doing. When he stomped again, the stars moved up to his shoulder, and on his 4th and final stomp, they moved up to his left temple. And there they stayed. And that, in fact, he declared that. He says, this is where there will remain. And then the other great spirits understood just how powerful he was. This small group of stars is known in Navajo as Delye. And Delye is the Navajo name for a common star cluster that we know in common English as the Pleiades. It's this Pleiades star cluster, the Navajo rendition of it. So just one more breath here, whatever version of frog you're doing, and then we'll come out here. So if you're in full frog like I am, maybe an easy way to come out is to move your hips forward until you're on your belly, and then you can release your legs, move your legs together, bend your knees, and then gently rock your knees from side to side here. If you're in baby frog, you can just slowly sit up, come out, and work out the kinks here. At some point, make your way up. And then after a little bit of counter work, we have the other side of dragon to do here. So for the other side of dragon, come to hands and knees, and then bring the left foot up between your hands, inch the right knee back. Come into this low lunge on this side. Find your dragon here, and if this side of dragon doesn't work for you, then remember, you always have this inverted dragon option. And by the way, sometimes we have injuries in our legs and our hips where one side we can do one thing, but we can't do it on the other side. So feel free to respect any kind of injury or condition on one side that maybe doesn't exist on the other. In other words, you can do an asymmetrical practice if you're working with an injury here. Otherwise, you can stay in dragon. You come into, if you're wanting a little bit more, come into high flying dragon or into low flying dragon. But otherwise, I'm just going to suggest basic dragon here, and then we'll stay here for a few minutes on this side here. The other creator spirits, after watching what Black Spirit was capable of, they asked Black Spirit, they said, well, we know what your power is now, so what we ask of you is, can you place stars in the sky and make the sky beautiful? And so Black Spirit took out a pouch that he always has, and inside the pouch he took out a single crystal, and he placed that crystal up high in the north and set an igniter star inside that crystal and made what is known to the Navajo as the North Fire. We, of course, know it as the North Star or Polaris. And then he took out a group of other stars and placed those bright stars on one side of the North Star, of the North Fire. And he called that arrangement of stars revolving male. He took out another set of crystals, another set of stars from his pouch, and he set them on the opposite side of North Fire. And that arrangement of stars that he called revolving female. And these two arrangements of stars, they always circle the North Fire. So incidentally, revolving male, the stars in revolving male are the stars that we more commonly in English know as the Big Dipper. And the arrangement of stars in revolving female is the stars that we more commonly know as the constellation of Cassiopeia. Black Spirit took out other crystals and other stars, placed them in the sky elsewhere. One of the constellations he created was deep in the south, and he called that constellation First Big One. And right next to it, he made a smaller grouping of little stars that he called the Rabbit's Foot. And the First Big One and the Rabbit's Foot actually make up the common English name of those stars is actually the constellation Scorpius. So just one more breath here. And then slowly bring yourself out of your version of a dragon. However you would like, you can do maybe a forward stretch like this. Come up into downward facing coyote again. However you would like to move. This is a little bit of the counter pose to counteract the stiffness here of these postures. And then from here, when you're ready, lower yourself down into Sphinx pose. So make your way onto your belly, legs extended out behind you comfortably here. And then arms come forward underneath your shoulders, about shoulder width apart here. And then relax your torso, let your spine stay until you feel a slight compression in your back here. If you don't feel much in regular Sphinx, this is where some blocks come in handy. Place blocks under your knee, under your elbows, to raise your elbows up a few inches, just to make the back bend a little bit more intense if that's what you need here. Otherwise, you don't use the blocks. In fact, you can move your elbows forward to make the back bend less intense until it's something that's appropriate for you here. Head can stay up, head can just lay down, or you can put your head on a prop here. And we'll stay here in Sphinx. Everything else, gravity, it's all gravity and time in this very simplistic, the simplest, not necessarily easy, but probably one of the simplest of back bends here. Some kind of call this television watching posture here. So we'll be here for a few minutes or so. So Black Spirit made other constellations, and then he finally stopped and said this was complete. And then he began to sit down to admire his work. Meanwhile, nearby was the trickster spirit known as Coyote. Now, Coyote wasn't invited to this meeting, but Coyote always likes to hang around, and the other spirits kind of consider Coyote a bit of a nuisance because Coyote's always up to tricks. He's always up to pranks. And Coyote sees what's going on. He says, "Wait, stop." He says, "See here, no one asked me what I wanted. No one asked me what I wanted to do or what my advice was." And the other spirits, again, a little bit upset with Coyote because they know he usually ends up doing some sort of prank that messes everything up. Black Spirit talked to Coyote and he says, "Well, you can just see what I did." He says, "I placed these beautiful stars in the skies, and these arrangements, these constellations that I created will help humans will give them good rules to live by and good wisdom to live by in these very beautiful constellations that I created." And as he spoke, Coyote said, "Well, I think I'm going to help you a little bit." And so he runs over and he grabs the pouch of crystals, the pouch of stars from the Black Spirit, and he runs off with them. So about one more minute here in Sphinx, if that's appropriate. And they can't catch him, and so he opens up the pouch and he just lets all the crystals and the stars out. He just throws them up to the sky into a great majestic arch, so that most of the remaining stars fall into this very broad, sweeping arc across the sky. And the Navajos have named that arc "That Which Awaits the Dawn." Of course, the more common English name that we use is the Milky Way. It wasn't a perfect arch, of course. It was just Coyote randomly throwing the stars out of the pouch, and so there's other stars that just randomly just ended up in the sky, and it kind of ended up messing up kind of disrupted all of Black Spirit's nice made constellations. And afterward, Black Spirit started scolding Coyote for this mishap here. One more breath in Sphinx pose. And then when you're ready, you'll slowly come out just make your way down onto your belly for a moment. You can rest your head on your hands. You can stay here, let your spine neutralize for a moment. This is counter pose time. You can also slowly move yourself up and back into child's pose or wide-legged child's pose. This is a little bit of a forward fold, and so sometimes it feels pretty dramatic after a back bend like Sphinx. Maybe just one more breath here. Bring yourself up. We'll move into the next posture, which is the first side of Cattail pose. So you'll make your way onto your back. Legs extended out long. And then raise your right leg up, extended leg up just as high as it goes for you. And then roll over, lower your right foot over to the left, rolling onto your left side. So right foot makes it all the way to the ground, inch your way onto your left side. This is the first stage of Cattail. You can stay here. Stage number 2 is bend the bottom right knee. See if you can clasp that right foot with your left hand. You don't have to, but maybe you can find it. Maybe you can use a strap if you really want to find that foot. Otherwise, you can just kind of fake it if you want to. You can stay here in stage number 2, or you can release your head and roll your head and your right shoulder back towards the floor to make a little bit of a back bend here. And this is stage number 3. So we'll stay here for a couple minutes, maybe not quite 3 minutes here. We'll just stay here for a little over 2 minutes on one side here. So find your version. If this is stage 3 was too deep, go back to stage 2 or stage 1 here. And then we kind of come back into our automatic stopping point here. So this is cat pulling its tail pose, or cattail pose for short here. So the creator gods, particularly Black Spirit, they were scolding Coyote for the mess he had made, the disorder and the chaos of him just throwing the stars randomly up into the sky. Meanwhile, Coyote was kind of not paying any attention to him. The Coyote was just laughing. And Coyote's looking into the pouch, and he notices that there's one crystal left, one star left. And so he takes it out and he decides he's going to be like Black Spirit. So instead of placing it in the north, like Black Spirit did, Coyote placed the star deep into the south. And he said, there's the last star. And he says, that's going to be my star. And so it's now known today as Coyote Star. It's so far south that it only appears for a few days a year above the southern horizon. So it's called the Coyote Star. It's also called the Monthless Star. But it's actually the star, our name, the English name for it, or the common name for the star. The official name for the star is the star Canopus. And it's true, if you were to grow up in the area of the world where the Navajo lived, that star would only make an appearance above the southern horizon for a few days of year. So that's the Coyote. That was the Coyote Star. Once Coyote placed that star, he looked up at the sky and he looked at the other creator gods and he said, now the sky is beautiful. Just one more breath here on this side of Cattail. If you have the bottom foot clasped, maybe release the bottom foot. Bend the upper leg and drag it along the lower leg so that it's easier to just roll yourself back onto your back. We have the other side of Cattail to do. So any kind of working out the kinks, maybe I kind of like to just bring the knees into my chest here and give the knees a hug here. But we will sit up for the other side of Cattail. So legs extend out long. This time the other leg, so the left extended leg, reach it up as far as it goes for you. And then lower the left leg over to the right. Inch yourself onto your right side. pause here to see if this is where you stay. This is stage number 1. Stage number 2, bend that bottom knee, reach back, see if you can clasp the bottom foot. And again, it's okay if you can't get that foot, but maybe some of us can here. And if you really want the foot, you can use something like a strap here. You can stay here. This is pretty good. Or you can do stage number 3. Stage number 3 is to lower that left shoulder back towards the ground to create a bit of a twist in the spine here. And usually this stops when we need to stop. Usually we kind of stop where a stopping point is here. So that's stage number 3. And again, if this is getting too painful or desperate, back up to one of the previous stages here. And we'll stay here for a couple of minutes. So that's the end of the story, the creator story of how the stars got up into the sky. Then one of the Navajo star tales. Just want to reflect on the fact that if you didn't catch how yin and yang balance is related to this story. So dark spirit is a spirit of order. It kind of represents order and justice and law. That's what the constellations that here we're making, these beautiful constellations of wisdom and how people should live their lives. And the Coyote Spirit is the spirit of disorder, of chaos and uncertainty, which is a real and ever-present part of life. And it's not something that we can ever eliminate. And so we always have to live with the prankster coyote. No matter how annoying, no matter how frustrating Coyote is. Coyote's reality. And so the idea behind the story is, yes, we try to make these great rules and belief systems and idealisms. Those are the black spirit constellations. But there will always be the random nameless stars that we don't know much about. There will always be that vast amount of nameless stars known as that which awaits the dawn, or in our case, the Milky Way here. So about 4 more breaths on this side of Cattail. When you're ready to come out of Cattail, you can go ahead and release the foot, then maybe bend the upper leg, bring it on top of the lower leg, slowly roll yourself back onto your back. Just for a final integration before our final resting pose of practice, maybe bring your knees into your chest, give your knees a nice hug here. I'm going to suggest knee circles here, so you can grab both knees with both hands, roll both knees to one side, and then away from the torso, and then both knees to the opposite side, and then back. Make a few, 2, 3, 4 slow circles in one direction. They can be big circles, they can be little subtle circles here. And then after you've made a few, change directions, go the other way. And then while you're doing this, notice the changing pressure of your low back on the floor here. And then from here, any other kind of final movement before you settle down into a final resting, restorative postures. You can give your knees a hug, you can do waterfall, any other kind of poses or movements. I always say this is use your own feeling and intuition here as something that you wanted to do during practice and didn't get to do it. So this is the time to do it. And then find your favorite resting pose. Roll over to one side. I'm going to suggest for this practice just sitting in a seated meditation. And you can find a comfortable, stable seat, just like I'm going to sit up on a block. Maybe you don't need a block. Maybe you just want a blanket, or maybe the floor is fine. Maybe cross-legged, or some kind of way to sit. So the Black Spirit sits cross-legged on the floor after he works, after he places stars. So maybe visualize yourself for a moment as a Black Spirit. You just got done creating your own constellations for your unique being, your unique life. And now you're sitting back, looking up at the sky, the beautiful stars, noticing the great work you have done, along with the disordered and nameless stars, along with the Milky Way that the Coyote, the trickster, has placed there as well. Can you find balance? Can you find softness in this balance of the order that we impose upon the sky and the seeming uncertainty that is also there? At some point, bring yourself back. Begin to deepen your breath. Maybe they make little movements with fingers, with toes. You can even start to slowly, gently rock your head from side to side. Make some other motions. Maybe arms start to move, legs start to move. Whatever your position was in, if it was a lying position or a seated position, go ahead and bring your knees together. Maybe lay on your side for just a moment. While you're here, give yourself a big thank you. Cultivate a deep sense of gratitude for your efforts and your practice, but also a deep sense of gratitude for you, your unique embodiment, your unique stellar constellation in this universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you're ready, gently bring yourself up to seated. If you're not already there, bring your hands together at heart center. And I'll end this practice with an Om. The inner starlight in me honors the inner starlight in you. Namaste.